I'm pleased to invite to the stage Martin Beatty to introduce our next inductee, Dixon Hemphill.
Good evening. It's a great feeling to follow my mentor, Mickey Heineken, up on the stage here. Mickey was the reason why I'm at Middlebury, so it's wonderful to follow him. Tonight, I'm proud to introduce an athlete who has had such a delight. I've had such a delight getting to know in the last several years. For the last few years, Dixon Hemphill had often sent a word of support to me, as well as donating to our track and field spring trip. Then in 2016, upon completion of our New Balance Foundation track in Virtue Fieldhouse, I decided to have the first two races of our very first indoor meet be alumni races. The very first race would be the Alumni Mile, and the second race would be the Alumni 60-meter dash. One race for distance runners and one for sprinters. But Dixon Hemphill, from the class of '49, read my email that I sent to the alumni, inviting them to these races. He immediately replied and said he wanted to compete. Not watch the meet, compete, which surprised me from the class of '49. As I did research on Dixon, I learned that not only was Dixon phenomenal as an athlete at Middlebury, he is still competing internationally. Track and field athletes in college will specialize in one discipline of the sport or another. Either you're a sprinter, a distance runner, jumper, or thrower. But at Middlebury, Dixon was an all-around athlete, competing in the mile and the pole vault. And they just don't make them like that anymore. If you know track and field, distance running and pole vaulters take two very different ways of training. Somehow Dixon managed to be a standout miler while also being able to sprint down a runway with a 10-foot bamboo pole, plant the pole so that his speed and force would make the pole bend, and while it would unbend, he would begin to swing his body into an inverted position and have the unbending pole catapult him feet first to high heights over a crossbar. Now, I went through this whole description because, as you can see, doing that as a pole vaulter is very different from training for the mile. Totally different training ways. In that very first meet, in January 2016, Dixon, at 91 years old, lined up at the starting line with several other young alumni for the mile run. The starter of that race was none other than our president, Lori Patton. And I have to say, Lori Patton was disappointed that she was going to shoot a modern-day electronic starter's pistol that I gave her. Lori wanted to shoot a real gun. And that's when I said, there's something to this last name. So after President Patton shot the gun, Dixon started on his mile race. 4 minutes into the race, he started his bell lap, which is the last lap. Something happened that I didn't expect. All the Middlebury track and field alumni that were there that day all jumped on the track and ran with him on the last lap of his race. And that's probably the most touching thing I've ever seen in my 30 years of coaching. It was terrific. It's on a video on our website somewhere. Hopefully you've seen it. After the race, I walked up to Dixon and I asked him about his race. And Dixon looked at me and said, "Martin, I can't talk to you right now. I have to go to the sprint start and get my blocks ready for the 60-meter dash." I had to step out of the way like a bullfighter and let him run down to the sprint start and get his blocks set. Now, I coach 18 to 21-year-old track athletes, and when they finish a race, I ask them if they're going to be all set to run the 4x4 relay after a 30-minute rest, and they look at me like I'm cross-eyed. They say, "No way am I going to be rested after 30 minutes." Well, Dixon can do it in his 90s, so that's a testament to Dixon. So, Dixon, the jig is up, as they say. I know your secret. For years, people have been looking for the foundation of youth, the fountain of youth, excuse me. I think I know where that fountain of youth is. It's in Northern Virginia, and you're drinking from it. I hope you can share it with us. So I give you 2019 Middlebury College Hall of Fame inductee, Dixon Hemphill.
Congratulations, Dixon. So we're going to do a photo first over here.
Yeah, we do a photo first.
You're in the middle. Okay, great. You have to come a little bit forward.
Thank you. Good evening. My wife June and I are happy to be here. In fact, at our age, we're happy to be anywhere. First, I want to introduce my family. 8 of them came up from Northern Virginia, much to my appreciation, and I'll quickly introduce them to you. Our daughter, Chris, and her husband, Fred Wheeler. Incidentally, they've been married 40 years this weekend. But Chris and Fred, you've got something to shoot for. We've been married 65 years. Next is our son, Jim, who is here. Our daughter, Susie, and her husband, Bob Howard, and their 2 boys, Luke and Jack Dixon. Did you notice that middle name? I was so pleased when Susie and Bob gave him that name. In high school, I was a pole vaulter, high jumper, and a discus thrower. I did fairly well. I was captain of my high school team and went on to Amherst College. At Amherst, I did the same 3 events, the pole vault, the high jump, and the discus, and I did quite well in those, but scholastically, I did very poorly. I just couldn't keep up with those prep school boys. After Amherst, I joined the Navy in 1943. I was a turret officer aboard a cruiser in the Atlantic, executive officer on a landing craft in the Pacific. At the end of the war, I was in Shanghai, China, and one of my fellow shipmates said to me, "Well, where are you going to college?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I want to go to Amherst." I think I want to go to Middlebury. That's a co-ed school. And my father and older brother also went there. So he said, "Oh, when you get to Middlebury, look up my sister." And so when I got to Middlebury, I looked up his sister. In fact, I dated her for 2 years. I'll have to say that I'm glad that never lasted. At Middlebury, I played football my freshman year, pole vaulted with the relay team in the winter, which was quite a challenge. There was no field house, no place to practice. So I'd bundled up in cold weather. I would run up and down the outside board track with a pole in my hand, just running back and forth. That was my training for the trip to New York, to Madison Square Garden, and to the Boston Garden, where the relay team went. I captained my team here at Middlebury, as I had done at high school. The next year, Duke Nelson invited me back for football. I'll have to say I didn't do awfully well my first year. I was a right end, but the guy that was first varsity on the team had played more football, much more than I had, And in those days, there was no offense and defense. So he played the whole game, every game, except when Middlebury was quite ahead, then the coach would put me in for a while. My junior year, I ran cross country, and that really was the first running I'd ever done. But little did I realize that 60 years later, I would have completed 12 marathons, 60 triathlons, and hundreds of road races. As sort of an introduction to my final talk tonight, I want to mention a New York driver who was headed up this way years ago, and he was lost, didn't know where he was. So he stopped at Middlebury and looked across at a farm. There was a farmer out there plowing his field, and he shouted over to him, "Hey, mister, was it Rutland is this Route 7? Is this Route 7 that I'm on?" And the farmer said, "Don't know." So he said, "Well, the town we just came through, is that Rutland?" The farmer said, "Don't know." So he said, "Well, how about the town up ahead? Is that Burlington?" The farmer said, "Don't know." And the exasperated New Yorker said, "You don't know much, do you?" The farmer replied, "Nope, but I ain't lost." Well, I like to think I'm not lost as far as getting to where I am today, and at the risk of bragging, I want to mention rather quickly 10 events that I have performed over the last 40, 50 years. Number one, being awarded the Hazeltine Kelvinoff Trophy, which is given to students for ability in athletics and excellence in scholarship. I won that here at Middlebury my senior year. The original trophy is here in the complex, the Peterson complex somewhere, and I have a replica at home. Second, I placed first in my age group at the Bud Light National Triathlon in Las Vegas in 1982. Incidentally, my daughter Susie and her husband Bob came out to cheer me on. They were at the point where in a triathlon, as you probably know, the first event is a swim, the next event is the bike, and the last is the run. So they were stationed at just about where the run began. It's a 6-mile run, and they said, "Well, you're doing well, but there's one man ahead of you." So being a runner, I hoped that I could catch him. And thanks to Susie and Bob cheering me on, I did finish first. Number three, qualifying for the Ironman Triathlon in Hawaii. I would love to have gone, but it was too expensive and I couldn't afford it, raising a family, 4 children, so I skipped that. Qualifying for the Boston Marathon at the age of 70 with a time of 3:44. Number 5, a member of the men's 90 to 99 relay team that set a world's record in the 4x400 and the 4x800 meters. Number 6, in 2015, the World Masters Committee informed me that I was first in the world at my age group in the 400, 800 mile, and 3,000 meter. Number 7, CBS Sunday Morning TV featured the race between me and Orville Rogers, a man who is 7 years older than I am, and I'm sure that some of you in this group saw the race. It was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, We lined up for the 60-meter race and took off, and he beat me by 5/100ths of a second. The next year, ESPN took over the race, and that race was in Maryland, near our home, and we lined up again for the 600-meter, and off we took, and I beat him by about a second. But after all, the man was 99 at the time and 6 years older. Number 8. In my age group last year, I took first place in the 90 and over age group in the New York Fifth Avenue Mile. And I enjoyed doing that, and I thought back to 20 years before when I ran that same race. But at that time, it was called the Trump 7th Avenue Mile. And you guessed it, it was the same Trump. He wanted the race to finish at his hotel on 60th Street, so that's where we ran. I ran that race in a time at the age of 74, with a time of 6:21, 6 minutes, 21 seconds. Bringing us up to number 9, last month I ran the Navy Mile back in Washington, D.C., where we live nearby. And because I was in the Navy, because I was older, and because I was a runner, they named one of the races the Lieutenant Commander Dixon Hemphill 70 and over mile. Which brings me to how I happen to be here tonight, an inductee in the Middlebury Athletics Hall of Fame. And of the awards that I've mentioned, that is number 1, without a question. And for that, I thank all of you who made this possible, all the other inductees, and those who put the program on. I do thank you very much.